The ships came on a Tuesday morning when the sky was clear and blue over most of Earth. They blocked out the sun. Thousands of them, black and massive, hanging in the atmosphere like stones waiting to fall. The Voron Dominion had arrived, and humanity had exactly 4 hours to understand that. Everything was about to change. The orbital defense stations fired first. Bright beams of light shot upward, striking the alien vessels. For a brief moment, people on the ground cheered. They thought their technology would save them. They were wrong. The Voron ships absorbed the attacks like water-swallowing stones. Then they fired back. The stations became balls of fire, falling through the sky like dying stars. Thal watched from his command ship. He was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin like polished black stone. 4 amber eyes glowed on his face, 2 where human eyes would be and 2 more above them on his forehead. He had led the Dominion's forces for 300 years. He had conquered 11 star systems. He had watched species beg, fight, and die. Humans, he decided, would be no different. The ground invasion began at dawn the next day. Voron soldiers dropped from the sky in metal pods. They were smaller than Thal, but still larger than most humans. Their armor was thick. Their weapons fired bolts of heated plasma, and their training made them perfect killing machines. Cities fell in hours. New York burned first, then London, then Tokyo. Governments collapsed. Military bases became graveyards. By the end of the first week, half of humanity was dead or captured. The survivors fled underground, into forests, into mountains. They hid like animals while the Voron built their new order on the bones of the old world. Thal established his command center in what used to be Seoul. He liked the view of the mountains. He liked watching human slaves clear the rubble of their own civilization. Everything was going according to plan. The resistance, such as it was, consisted of scattered groups with no coordination, no resources, and no hope. Or so he believed. 300 kilometers south, in the ruins of Bizen, a man named Doen refused to die. He was not special, not at first. Just a sergeant in the Korean army, 32 years old, with a wife who died in the first bombing and a daughter he never found. When his unit was destroyed, he gathered the survivors. When no survivors wanted to surrender, he convinced them to fight. When fighting seemed impossible, he showed them how to become ghosts. 12 people remained. Soldiers, engineers, ordinary citizens who had picked up weapons because the alternative was slavery. Among them was Yuna, a young medic who had been a nursing student before the invasion. She was quiet and precise, with steady hands that could stitch wounds in total darkness. There was Taiwu, a former competitive shooter who rarely spoke but could hit a target from 2 kilometers away. And there were others, each carrying their own grief, their own rage, their own reasons to keep breathing. They lived in the subway tunnels beneath the destroyed city. They ate whatever they could find. They trained in silence, learning to move without sound, to kill without warning. Dahyun taught them everything he knew, and when that was not enough, he invented new methods. The Voron were stronger and better armed, but they were not used to enemies who refused to behave like conquered people. The first Voron officer died 6 weeks after the invasion. He was inspecting a labor camp when a bullet came from nowhere and removed his head. His guards searched for hours. They found nothing. No shooter, no shell casing, no footprints. It was as if the bullet had fallen from the sky. The second officer died 3 days later. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each death was clean, silent, and impossible to explain. The Voron soldiers began to whisper. They called the killers the Bizen ghosts. Thal received the reports with mild annoyance. 12 dead officers in 6 weeks was irritating but insignificant. He had lost more soldiers to wildlife on some planets. He ordered increased patrols and better security protocols. The deaths continued. What Thal could not understand, was what drove these humans. The Varan fought for the Dominion because they were bred for it. War was their purpose, conquest their religion. They could not imagine fighting for something as abstract as freedom, or revenge or love. Do-Yoon fought for all three. Every night, he saw his wife's face in his dreams. Every morning, he woke with his daughter's name on his lips. He did not know if she was alive or dead, but he knew that somewhere, children like her were suffering under Varan rule. That knowledge was a fire that never went out. It burned away his fear, his exhaustion, his doubt. It left only purpose. His unit felt it too. Yuna had lost her entire family in the first hour of the invasion. Taiwu had watched his hometown become a mass grave. Each of them carried wounds that would never heal. But instead of breaking them, the wounds had forged them into something harder. Something the Varan had never faced before. The 27th kill was different. It was not a random officer, but a battalion commander, one of Thal's trusted generals. He died in his private quarters, a place that should have been impossible to reach. The guards outside heard nothing. The security systems recorded nothing. In the morning, they found the body with a single knife wound through the heart and a message written in blood on the wall. "We are still here." Thal read the report himself. For the first time, he felt something other than annoyance. Not fear, not yet, but curiosity. What kind of creatures were these humans? What made them cling to resistance when surrender would save their lives? He decided to go to Earth himself. Not to fight, that would be beneath him, but to observe, to understand. He wanted to see these Bizan ghosts with his own 4 eyes. He wanted to know what made them different from the millions of humans who had accepted their chains without protest. He did not know it yet. But that decision would be the beginning of his end. In the tunnels beneath Bizan, Dahin sat cleaning his rifle. Around him, his people prepared for another night of hunting. They were tired, hungry, and outnumbered by a factor of thousands. They had no ships, no advanced technology, no allies coming to save them. But they had something the Varan could not match. They had each other. They had purpose. And they had a look in their eyes that made even the bravest Varan soldier hesitate. The war for Earth was far from over. It was only beginning. Thal's shuttle landed in the ruins of Bizan on a gray morning. Rain fell from heavy clouds, turning the broken streets into rivers of mud and ash. The Warlord stepped onto human soil for the first time and breathed deep. The air smelled of smoke and death. He found it pleasant. 500 soldiers formed a protective circle around him. They were his personal guard, the deadliest warriors the Dominion had ever produced. Each one had killed at least 100 enemies in battle. Each one would die for Thal without hesitation. He walked through the destroyed city like a king inspecting his new kingdom. The humans he passed did not look at him. They kept their heads down, their eyes on the ground. They had learned that meeting a Varan's gaze meant punishment. Thal found their obedience boring. Where was the fire he had heard about? Where were the ghosts who killed his officers? He spent 3 days in the city, visiting labor camps and construction sites. The humans worked in silence, building new structures for their masters. They moved slowly, ate little, and died easily. Thal began to think the reports had been exaggerated. Perhaps the Bizan ghosts were just lucky criminals who would soon be caught and executed. Then they captured Soyen. She was young, maybe 25, with short black hair and eyes that held no fear. The patrol found her carrying medical supplies through a restricted zone. When they stopped her, she tried to run. When they caught her, she fought. It took 4 soldiers to hold her down, and she broke one of their arms before they finally restrained her. Thal was intrigued. He ordered her brought to his temporary command center, a building that had once been a bank. The vault now served as an interrogation room, its thick walls blocking all sound. She stood before him with blood on her face and fire in her heart. Her hands were bound, her body beaten, but she held herself like a queen facing a servant. Thal had seen this posture before in other species, but usually only in their leaders. This was a courier, a messenger, a nobody. Yet she stood as if she owned the room. He asked her about the ghosts. She said nothing. He asked her about their base. She smiled. He asked her about their leader. She laughed. The sound echoed in the vault, bright and sharp like breaking glass. Thal felt his 4 eyes narrow. In 300 years, no prisoner had ever laughed at him. They begged, they screamed, they bargained. They did not laugh. He leaned closer, close enough that she could smell the alien strangeness of his breath. His voice was calm, almost gentle. He told her what would happen if she did not cooperate. He described the labor camps, the breeding programs, the slow death that awaited all humans who defied the Dominion. He painted a picture of suffering so complete that even his own soldiers looked away. Soyen listened. When he finished, she spoke for the first time since her capture. "You think you've won," she said through bloodied lips. "You haven't even begun to understand what you've awakened." Thal asked what she meant. She told him about humans. Not the weak, frightened creatures he saw in the camps, but the others. The ones who had survived plagues, wars, ice ages, and their own self-destruction. The ones who had built civilizations from nothing and rebuilt them when they fell. The ones who carried inside them a spark that could not be extinguished by any force in the universe. She told him that the Vund and thus, ghosts were not special. They were just ordinary people who had remembered what humans could be. And every day, more people were remembering. In basements and caves, in forests and mountains, in the hearts of slaves who smiled at their masters while plotting their deaths. She told him that the Dominion had not conquered Earth. It had simply woken. Something that had been sleeping. Tal listened to every word. Then he killed her himself, a single strike that ended her life instantly. He was not cruel enough to make her suffer. In truth, he respected her more than he had respected anyone in centuries. But her words stayed with him. That night, he could not sleep. He stood at the window of his command center, watching the rain fall on the ruined city. His 4 eyes scanned the darkness, looking for movement, for signs of the ghosts. He saw nothing, but he felt something. A presence, a weight, as if the city itself was watching him back. In the morning, he ordered a full battalion to sweep the underground tunnels. 2,000 soldiers, the best equipment, orders to capture or kill anything that moved. They entered the subway system with confidence. They had done this 100 times on 100 worlds. Clear the tunnels, eliminate the resistance, move on. 12 hours later, the battalion had not reported and search parties found them scattered throughout the tunnels. Some had been shot. Some had been stabbed. Some had fallen into traps, pits lined with sharpened metal and filled with dirty water. A few had simply disappeared, their fate unknown. Of the 2,000 soldiers who entered, fewer than 300 emerged alive. The survivors told strange stories. They spoke of shadows that moved with purpose, of sounds that came from everywhere and nowhere, of enemies who seemed to know every step before it was taken. One soldier, his eyes wide with a fear Voran rarely showed, described a man who walked toward them in the darkness. Just walked, slowly, without weapons visible, without armor, without any protection at all. The soldiers had fired. The man kept walking. They had fired again. He kept walking. By the time he reached them, half the squad had fled. The rest died where they stood, killed by other humans who had appeared from nowhere the moment their attention was on the walking man. Thal demanded to know who this man was. The survivor shook his head. He did not know a name, but he would never forget the eyes. dark and calm, without hatred or fear. Eyes that looked at death and simply accepted it as part of the journey. The warlord dismissed the soldier and sat alone in his command center. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light on the destroyed city. Somewhere in those ruins, a man with strange eyes was waiting. Thal realized, for the first time in 300 years, that he did not know what to do next. The thought bothered him more than he wanted to admit. He had conquered 11 star systems. He had broken species far older and stronger than humanity. But these humans, these impossible, irrational, infuriating humans, refused to follow the rules. He began to plan more carefully. No more battalions, no more brute force. He would study these ghosts like a scientist studying a new disease. He would learn their patterns, their weaknesses, their fears, and when he understood them completely, he would destroy them so thoroughly that no human would ever think of resistance again. He did not know that in the tunnels below, Dao Yun was making plans of his own. The warlord had come to Earth. The monster had shown his face. And for the first time since the invasion began, the ghost had a target worthy of their skills. The game had changed. Now it was personal.